Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm so glad you're joining us today. I'm Lorie Hartshorn, and I am sitting in the chair of Mike Sherbino. And it's just a delight to be here. I so appreciate Mike and The Perspective, and you'll see me on here every few weeks. But I'm always excited to come and be part of The Perspective because I learn every time I'm here. I get a fresh perspective, and I hope today you do too. We've got a great guest today, and you're going to learn more about what it means to serve people well. Well, our guest is Kim Botto. She's a passionate advocate for kids and teens, especially those who are neurodivergent, disabled, or have experienced trauma in some form. You know, she has over 30 years of experience in children and student ministry, including 16 years at Crossroads Church. And Kim has dedicated her life to equipping parents and educators and ministry leaders with practical tools to create safe, welcoming spaces for all kids, no matter their background or behavior. And she's an adoptive mom. She's a speaker. She's a writer. She's a coach. Get this. She's a grandma of 11. I mean, come on. Kim brings both her personal experience, obviously her love for kids, her professional experience to her work and to her writing. And she coaches and trains, and she's helped thousands understand how to shift their view of challenged kids from judgment, which don't we do that? We make a judgment call maybe firsthand, and she moves us to curiosity, which I love that. So how do you respond to people with unique needs, especially children? Today, we're going to be talking about her new book, Boundless Hope, which offers encouragement and practical strategies for parents, educators, ministry leaders, friends of kids, help us raise and mentor kids with unique needs. I can't wait for you to hear insights. Kim, welcome to The Perspective. So glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, Lorie. I appreciate it. Well, already having fun being with you.
Well, good. My goodness, you've done so many things. I'm an educator too. I was a teacher for over 21 years. We love the classroom. We love kids, right? What got you started in education?
Well, I actually am not in education. I have a master's in business, but God called me to ministry. I have always been passionate about the kid that's sitting on the outside of the circle on the playground, or the one who is maybe getting sent to the hall in school. And so I really felt a call to ministry about, 30 some years ago. So I started working in the local church at that point.
You know, I love that. I still think you're an educator because you're educating us now, even though educators are primarily in the classroom. Really, you are teaching us. And I love what you're teaching us through your book, through your podcast. This book, Boundless Hope, Kim, like what inspired you to write it? You know, was there a specific moment or experience that made you realize this book needs to be written?
Well, for years, especially working in the church, there are kids that come in with challenging behavior, and I have seen churches, they don't know what to do with them. They're going, and often what they do then is say, you can't come back, or your parents have to stay in here with you. And when that happens, we lose the opportunity to share the hope of Jesus with them. And so I don't want that to happen anymore. And with the team that I led at Crossroads, back in August of 2012, as we were praying for what God was calling us to, sometimes it was all over the place, but this particular, people are coming back and they're going, I think we should be a place for all kids. We should be a place for kids to bring their hard stories. We should be a place for kids who are getting kicked out of other places, which that does happen, to find a home here. And so that's when we really started the work to be trauma informed, to get training on how you engage with kids who are neurodivergent. And then as far as the book, I ended up getting invited to do speaking. First, it was local because churches would go, Bobby's at your church? We said Bobby couldn't come back to our church. I'm like, yeah, he's doing great. And so they started asking us to come in and train them. And so I wanted something that people could hold on to, that they could refer back to, that really helps them, not only them personally, but also helps them educate and really build empathy. We need to build empathy first for the kids, through science and stories and statistics, and then give them practical strategies to respond in helpful and hopeful ways to kids who are hurting and lonely and misunderstood.
I love that, Kim. You know what? First of all, thank you. I think we've struggled. I've been a pastor as well, and we struggled to know how to serve families well. and how to serve these kids well. And I love this when you say, you got to shift from judgment to curiosity. Kim, how do we do that? How do we change our judgmental mindset to a curious mindset when it comes to kids that are, neurodivergent or challenged in some way?
Well, I think first, when we see a behavior that we don't understand or a kid who's not meeting expectations, rather than make assumptions, start asking questions of yourself. What might be going on with this child? When did this behavior start? Does it always happen during large group? Well, that might be a clue that maybe large group is overwhelming for them. Maybe they have sensory differences where all the noise and all the people together make them behave in such a way that, behavior is communication. So when they behave in a way that doesn't meet our expectations, let's dig beneath that behavior and see what need might be there. Or maybe there's a gap in their development. Maybe we're having an activity that they simply don't have the skills to do. And they might show that not by saying, excuse me, Kim, I don't know how to do this. They'll show us through ripping up the activity or knocking over their chair. So I think being curious just starts with asking questions. And Laura, I've been thinking about a lot lately. When we're curious, we can't be judgmental. You can't have those two things together. So just start asking questions. And Dr. Ross Green, he's written a couple of books on behavior, and he says children do well when they can. So if we have that mindset, then when we see a kid not meeting expectations, we're naturally going to look for ways that we can help them.
That is key. You can't be judgmental if you're curious. Wow. And you know what? I've been in the classroom long enough to know that's so true. Instead of just jumping on the behavior to correct the behavior, to make the behavior what you want it to be in that moment, ask yourself what's going on with that child. Is that the way? Would that be a helpful way to shift from judgment to curiosity?
Right. And in the book, I have a list of questions you can ask. Is this something that happens over and over again? If it does, what time during the hour does it happen? Is there something particular that's going on? Is there a certain kid that's always present when it happens? Is there a certain leader that's absent when it happens? Maybe their safe person isn't there. So yeah, I think it helps us. Like Dr. Ross Green says, the kids want to do well. They don't wake up and say, I'm going to go in and ruin Lori's classroom today. That's not what they say, but they might get in there and maybe they've had a rough day. Maybe they've had a rough life. And I think another thing to remember is it's not about us. Lori, I'm sure you had in the classroom when a kid might do something, and if we take it personally, then we are not in a position to help them because what we're trying to do is defend ourselves. And it's not about us.
Oh my, you've just hit something huge on the head. There's two ways you can teach, out of love or out of fear, and kids will smell fear every time. And fear actually they not only sniff it out, but it almost it does create an unsafe environment. That is super helpful, Kim, because I think sometimes we take it personally, like we're not doing a good job if a kid is acting out. You mentioned the word empathy. Talk to us about that. Why is this so critical?
Well, as we work to help the kids, like as I work with churches and I also work with schools and organizations, I think it's really important before we get into the strategies to build some empathy, because if we are empathetic, if we understand, how a kid who is autistic, how their brain works differently, and the behavior we're seeing is just their responses to having a neurodiverse brain in a neurotypical world. And so when we look at those things, then we're going to have more empathy. And so we will try new things. If we don't have empathy for the kid, if we're going, this kid is just being non-compliant, this kid knows what to do and they're just not doing it, we're not going to look for ways to help them. That's how kids then get kicked out of our churches.
Right. 100%. And you know what? I think anything we do when we're motivated and driven by love, it changes how we approach things and how we see things, and especially how we see people. Well, we're going to come right back with Kim Botto and her book, Boundless Hope. And, if you need prayer or help or encouragement, loving people in your life, give us a call, 1-855-910-6297. We're here for you. Well, welcome back to The Perspective. Wow, we're being so inspired and learning from Kim Botto in her book, Boundless Hope for Every Child. Kim, when you were just speaking earlier about, we just, talked about the importance of love, being motivated by love. And I think that it's not that churches haven't been loving, but they haven't known how to address these kids that sometimes create chaos in the environments that we want, to look a certain way. So, what are some practical steps? Like, how can churches create, as you would say, welcoming spaces, safe spaces for neurodivergent children?
I think first, we've already talked about be curious. When a kid isn't doing what we hope they do, try to look for ways to help them. And another way to be curious is to talk to the parents. And as we talk to parents, again, not in a judgmental way, not listing all the infractions that that kid had that day, but instead going up to them and telling them how much you love having the child at your church and what would be best for your child. What are some, give them some facts. We don't want to go, they were out of control and they were so wild. But you could say, during large group, he had a really hard time. He was running around the room during large group, but there's strategies that work in school. So be curious, be kind, assume the best in the kid. As we said, or like Dr. Ross Green said, children will do well if they can. So assume that this child is doing it the best that they can. And the third is be flexible. Sometimes we get a little rigid. I was in a room the other day and a volunteer was trying to get the kid to sit down for small group. And I said, well, do they have to sit down? And she said, well, we always sit down. And I said, but do they have to? And she said, oh, no, this kid did so much better standing by the table doing it. I've had leaders that have had small group under the table because there's a child that feels safe under there. Kids might need flexible seating. Maybe they don't do well in sitting on the floor with a bunch of peers, but they would do much better in a chair in the back. So I think be curious, be kind, and be flexible is a great way to start.
Oh, that's fantastic. Curious, kind, flexible. I think, you know what? That would go a long way in any environment, really, wouldn't it?
Or do that with your spouse too.
That's right. That's right. Well, you're a professional grandmother, I'd say, to have 11. And you probably use that with your grandkids, right?
I do. I do.
Well, even as parents and people listening are saying, but I just, maybe it has something to do with them, but the frustration level can rise. What do you say to parents and those who are working with children that truly are feeling overwhelmed? Maybe they feel discouraged, like they're trying to be curious, kind, and flexible, but they're tapped out. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, if we're feeling frustrated, we are not in a position to help our kid. So, because a dysregulated adult cannot help a dysregulated kid calm. Calm is contagious, and so is frustration. So it's take a deep breath. And if we do have somebody, if it's in the church, pass the baton to somebody else. We can tap out and go take a breath, get a drink of water, and then come back to the situation. And also just realizing like these kids are created in God's image. And scripture says, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Realizing that about the child that we're looking at. And then also in that verse from Psalm 139:14, it then says, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made, and my soul knows it very well. I think when we start realizing that for some kids, they don't think they're so wonderful, they don't think they're so amazing. And if we go in with that mindset, I know for me, it helps me remain calm, knowing that this is an amazing kid with tremendous potential that God has created and put on earth in front of me right now. And I have the opportunity to speak God's truth to him. I have the opportunity to change those narratives in his head. Because if a kid's misbehaving, misbehaving at church, they're probably doing 99.9%, they're doing it everywhere else. So they're having tons of negative interactions. We can be the one speaking to their potential.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Kim. I think that's a great reminder. Let's pick up before we have to wrap up here. Trauma informed. So kids, sometimes there's multiple reasons why they're acting out. But what do you mean when you say trauma informed care and you train and equip people in this? What does that look like?
Okay, so there's trauma-informed care. There's a bunch of people that offer training on that. And what that means is you're aware that that kid's story started long before they were standing in front of you, and that their behavior is typically about what has happened before rather than what's happening in the minute, in the moment. They're reacting to how they've been treated in the past. Trauma-informed care is based on connection and relationship. And Karen Purvis was a pioneer in working with kids from trauma. And one of the things she would always say is connect before you correct. Trauma-informed care uses this principle throughout. So what that would mean is if you have a child who is displaying concerning behavior, you're going to connect with them first. So Lorie, if you are, well, I'll give you an example. I got a call about a preschooler who was being combative and they had removed him from the room, this precious little 4-year-old. I go down there, I'm talking to him, just trying to get to know him. And he said, shut up, with a bunch of expletives after. Connect before you correct means I didn't say, you don't talk to me like that. Instead, I said, it seems like you're really upset that I keep talking. His whole demeanor changed. He thought he was going to get yelled at. And I said, but we use kind words when we talk to each other. Can you ask me in a kind way? And it took him a couple minutes, but then he turned to me and he said, will you stop talking, please? And as I talked to the mom, this kid had experienced unimaginable loss. And if I had immediately gone to correction, I would have lost the opportunity to get to know this kid. And this kid then ended up feeling safe in our environment. And the mom's going, I'm having trouble with him everywhere. Well, of course, because he had a tragic loss in his life. So trauma-informed care is based on relationship and connection, and connect before you correct is just one of many, many strategies.
That is so powerful, Kim. It's so powerful. And I think, listen before you jump, right?
Right.
Really important. And to have empathy, as you reminded us of where these kids perhaps have come from, what has happened to them. This is just incredibly helpful. I want people to get your book, Boundless Hope, and tell us a little bit quickly about the key message there and what's a takeaway for every reader.
Well, it starts out with what Jesus' view of children is, and then we build empathy. And I do that through sharing statistics as far as the number of kids who've experienced trauma, who have brains that are wired differently, who have disabilities. And then after building some empathy, and then also it's filled with tons of personal stories in my work with churches and organizations and my own family, because we have 2 kids who are adopted and they have trauma in their life. And then it's filled with practical strategies that you can use in the home, that you can use in the church, that you can use in the school, that are based on building relationship. We still have to have boundaries. We still have expectations. And if we do it through the context of relationship, our coaching and correction will be much more effective.
Fantastic. Well, bless you in your work and your ministry. Thank you for teaching us, equipping us today. Boundless Hope for Every Child is available where all books are sold. And thank you for joining us on The Perspective today, Kim. It's a delight to have.
Thanks. Thank you, Lorie.
Okay. We'll be right back.
Will you donate 2 hours of your time? Crossroads Prayer Center is seeking people with a heart willing to join in the amazing work God is doing through prayer. Providing over 1,300 prayer interactions daily, Crossroads Prayer Partners speak biblical truth and words of life over people's need. Join in God's transforming work through prayer and enrich your faith. Learn more at crossroads.ca/prayervolunteer.
Have you ever read a Bible story for like the 10th time and suddenly noticed something you'd never seen before? Well, that happened to me recently as I was reading 2 Samuel. Now, catch this name, Mephibosheth. Yeah, I think I got it right. He was Jonathan's son, and he was King Saul's grandson, and he had a disability. When his caregiver heard of Jonathan and Saul's death, she ran in fear, she tripped, and she dropped him. And his legs and feet were likely broken, and without proper care, he remained permanently disabled. Well, in 2 Samuel 4, we fast forward, David is now the king, and he wants to honor someone from Saul's family. And he asks a former servant, Ziba, who replies, well, Jonathan has a son who is disabled. Now, there's no mention of his name. Notice he has a son who's disabled. Just his condition is stated. And when Mephibosheth comes before David, he calls himself, catch this, a dead dog. Wow, that's how worthless Mephibosheth felt. But David responds with kindness, and he says this, listen to the words of King David, don't be afraid. I will certainly show you kindness for your father Jonathan's sake. I will give back to you all the land of your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. Now, that's the part of the story I knew. And it's so powerful, right? Like someone forgotten, being seen, none named, is invited to the king's table. And David shows us what true love looks like. I mean, most kings, they would have wiped out the family line of the previous king, but not David. He wasn't envious or boastful or proud. He actually shows kindness to Mephibosheth, who was crippled. He gave him land that belonged to his grandfather Saul, and he treats him as one of his own family by inviting him to actually eat at his dinner table every day. I mean, this is incredible. And this ended, well, a family feud. Now let's pause for a minute. Are you part of a family? Are you part of a family feud? People aren't maybe on speaking terms, or they may even be afraid to connect. And if you want to show true love, why don't you follow David's example and maybe send out a dinner invite? Yep. It could be just as simple as that. Share a meal together. Drop the envy, drop the pride, drop the argument, the boasting of who's right or who's wrong, because that's the truth about love. But here's the other part of the story, actually, that I never noticed. The story goes on. And between Mephibosheth's injury and his invitation, there's a moment in 2 Samuel 5 when David is out. He captures Jerusalem, the Jebusites' army. They're taunting him, and they say to him, even the blind and the lame could turn you away, David. And David responds and says, well, the blind and the lame will not get into the palace. I mean, this sounds like not the King David that we know. And yet, years later, Mephibosheth did get into the palace. Not only that, he's given a seat at the king's table. He's treated as one of his sons. I mean, David may not have set out to make a statement about disability and inclusion, but his actions spoke loudly. He overturned an old saying and broke a cultural norm, and he invited someone who had been overlooked into the place of honor. Well, that brings me to us. Are we intentional about inviting people with disabilities, with challenges that are neurodivergent, as we heard today from Kim? Are we, intentional about inviting them into our lives, our homes, our churches? Do we see them? Not just their condition, but them. Do we know their names? Creating a community of belonging, well, it actually starts with you and me, and it requires an invitation. So, who needs an invite to your table? Who needs an invite to your church? Who needs an invite into your life? Let's be like King David, and let's send out the invitations to be inclusive, no matter the challenges, no matter the disability, no matter our differences, because this actually shows what it really means to love people.
Hi, my name's Ryan Walter, and I played a long time in the National Hockey League. So long ago, I played against the Philadelphia Flyers back in the day when they were the Broad Street Bullies. Let's talk about fear. We had some fear. You couldn't be alive and not be afraid in that situation. But you know what's interesting is Napoleon says there's two great levers to move men, fear and interest. But you know what Jesus says? This is crazy. He says, fear not, right? 365 times in the Bible, apparently, it says, fear not. So this week, let's not fear. Let's believe in Jesus.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like I got a fresh perspective today and a great reminder of what it looks like to love all people. I mean, Kim's work and obviously her heart for kids is something that we all want, right? So who are those people in your life that maybe you need to show greater curiosity for? I love that we can't be judgmental at the same time as being curious. I really took that away today. And I don't know what you need prayer for. Maybe there's some, people in your life that have unique challenges. Would you give us a call, 1-855-910-6297. We're here for you. We want to pray with you. And we want to support you too. So if we can let us know, we'll send you our monthly devotional that Mike writes. It's got a great daily devotions for you. It will help and support you as you're on your walk of learning to love God and learning to love others more, because isn't that what we're all called to? Well, I hope that you're joining us each and every day this week, and that you know that you are loved, that God sees you and whatever you're going through. And if you're having some unique, special challenges in your life, know that He is there with you. So yeah, reach out, give us a call today. We're happy to help and support you. And I would say, look for people in your life that you can be a support to, that you can invite to your table. Get the kettle started, pour the tea, call the kids to the table. Let's gather around and show what it really means to love one another. Thanks for joining us today on The Perspective.